2, 3, 4. Mic check, check. Check 1, check 2, check 3, check 4. Mic check. 1, 2. One, two, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. Mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2. Check. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1.
Well, for years we didn't have a working press feed up there, and now we do. So, do you see me talking right now? Yes. Okay, cool. Check 1, 2. Check. Okay. Check 1, 2, and then you see meter for this one. Check 1, 2, test 1, 2. I turned it off on my laptop. Oh, okay. Okay, cool. All right, I'm gonna turn this one off.
If somebody's got it, just email it to me.
plague. My goodness. Why? Why don't you make a different email account for this type of thing?
No kidding. I mean, it makes it where you won't check your emails when it dings because you just think it's another one of those. Yeah, come on down here. We'll set you right here. Oh, how that go? And you don't have any audio or video in it, right? Oh, yeah. Oh, you do? Oh. Guess I'm not gonna get on the football team. No, it should be, it's a pretty simple PowerPoint. And you're gonna wear the lavalier? Huh? And then you're gonna wear the lavalier? Yeah, Dr. Olson. In fact, yesterday he said he didn't want to stand on the stage, he wanted to walk around. Yeah. He may do that again, I don't know. Gosh, I don't know since the remodel. Do you know, Kurt?
Is this formatted for Mac? Do you know?
Yeah, he used PC yesterday.
Okay.
Do you know how many this holds since the remodel? Yeah.
This is corrupted.
Do y'all have this presentation on an email anywhere? It's not one to read the flash. No. Oh, okay.
Well,
Quick question, is there a way to email that file? Or is it too big?
Dropbox might be of assistance.
yes.
Would it, Robert?
Yeah.
Dropbox be of assistance?
Yeah, we can use any type of cloud as long as we can log in and get access to it.
I was thinking if it's too big to email, then Dropbox would be the.
You can take it over to my office and see if I can copy it over to another disk.
This is, I don't think it's going to work on any Windows.
ATO support. AT, Academic Technology Office, support, all one word. Oh, this is a PC.
You want me to go with my Mac?
Sure. Do we have SharePoint, Kurt?
GA.
Is it a different one or does it switch automatically?
It's doing fine in here, but it wasn't going through on Blue GA. We're good. So give me a couple seconds to get this recorded.
I'll wait another 2 minutes. Good afternoon. I think I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for coming this afternoon. Are the folks in the back all able to hear me just fine? There are only a couple of brave souls down in the front, so I want to make sure the group in the back can hear. Well, first of all, thanks to our dedicated and talented IT staff. The presentation apparently was written on a Mac, and we tried to run it on a PC, and that doesn't work. You can understand why these companies that have proprietary software do so well. I was afraid for a minute I was going to have to play the piano for a little bit to entertain all of you. I've always wondered why that's here. I guess now I understand. Well, thank you so much for coming. We had one of these forums yesterday, and there was also a big crowd, and I really appreciate it. I know that people are busy in the summer, and it's a big commitment to take an hour out of your day to come across campus and attend these kinds of forums. But they're so important because so much is happening, and the need for communication of all kinds is critical right now. So thank you. The forum that we're having this week, we will be continuing with a series of forums, and we're looking at dates right now in late September, early October, after all of our faculty and students return for fall semester, because we'll be able to bring even more people into these groups to discuss what lies ahead for the University of Louisville. And yesterday at the forum there was actually a very good suggestion, and that was that for the next one of these we consider using sort of a panel type format where there would be perhaps 4 or 5 others from our team who join me, and I think it was a great idea, and we're going to try that this fall to give more input and more opportunity for our faculty and our staff to engage with the administration and help us make such important decisions. So what I want to talk about today are issues related to what I see as a critically important transition that U of L and its faculty and its staff need to begin thinking about making. We have been focusing, as you know, since January, intently on a number of issues that have all been very public. Things that have been widely discussed. They are largely related to issues that occurred in the past, and no question they require diligent resolution, and I'm pleased to report that we have great teams of people from across both campuses focused on these things, and we're making progress, and these things are getting done. And so what I would suggest is those of you who have specific questions about things like NCAA, foundation audit, SACS accreditation, that sort of thing, we put out a YouTube video. It was released to the campus community on Sunday, and thanks to the 800 people who have looked at it already. that's great. If there are those of you who haven't, if you'd like to take a look at that, please do. Mark Hebert does a great job interviewing and bringing up questions that he hears across campus, and so he sat with me last week and we discussed those issues. So I don't want to be redundant today for those of you who have already spent time looking at that video, but I also want to say that we need to start looking ahead, and that doesn't mean we stop the work of completing the due diligence on the things that we're working on. That's not the point. The point is that in parallel with completing the resolution of those issues, we have to start focusing our time and attention on the future. And there are a lot of reasons for that. I think it's hard for faculty and staff to come to work every day and be excited about dealing with historic problems. People might feel good about it, they might be glad that it's finally being addressed, things are getting done, that's fine. But that's not what brings people to work every day. People come to work every day because they want to engage and they want to do something that is future-oriented. And we've been missing that at U of L. We really have been heavily focused on the past and dwelling on things that happened before and not looking to the future. So today I show this diagram sort of as emblematic of this transition. You know, we're in the shaded area here in the Venn diagram, or how you choose to look at it, where we're needing to really do both things simultaneously for a while until we're able to really move forward and think exclusively about the future. So this is a slide that has a couple things on it. Those of you who are familiar with University Hospital, which we're going to talk about for just a moment, will be familiar with this, the power of you, which I think is a great marketing tool and very emblematic of the University of Louisville, but also the power of you, all of you out in this room, who are the ones who have to be engaged in everything that we do in order for it to be successful. And we're starting to hear terms like, our hospital, right, and our university. And I love it when people use those terms, because that's what it is. This is not a corporate entity where people just come here to make a paycheck and go home. This is an organization made up of people who have ownership of it. The faculty, the staff, the students are the university. And so the more we think in those terms, the more successful we'll be. So what has happened this year at University of Louisville Hospital, I think, typifies how this can work really well. So if you go back in time a year at University Hospital, there were a lot of problems there. Morale was down, and for a number of reasons. The hospital was being managed by a big national company, like a lot of hospitals are, and the people who worked there really were pretty much told what to do. Here are the policies, here's the way we do things, like it or not. This is the set of rules that you all must follow. And that kind of a top-down approach I don't think fares very well in an academic setting. And you saw people leaving, the nurses were leaving, we were having trouble keeping the place staffed, we were using a lot of traveling nurses. The morale of the staff translated into the morale of the patients. The patient satisfaction scores were low, the quality scores were low. Everything that could be going wrong was starting to go wrong. And University Hospital is a place, I can tell you, for having worked there for 23 years, is a very proud place. The people who work there are proud of the work they do, the care that the patients receive, and it was sad to see this devolving of morale at the hospital. So when the decision was made in December of last year to sort of take matters into our hands and bring the hospital management back under the control of UMC, 6 months of really hard work began, where we saw progressively staff and faculty engage in a countless number of committees and forums to really think about what it was going to take to stand up this hospital under our own management and to design it the way we thought a hospital should be designed and how it should run. And so, it started slow in January and February, and then you could see a head of steam building. And by March or April, there were dozens of people, if not more than 100, who were engaged every day in the very hard work of making University of Louisville Hospital's transition a success. So on July 1st, when UMC came back into control of University of Louisville Hospital, there was a celebratory atmosphere, and that has continued. The staff and the faculty at that hospital are obviously engaged in the work that's being done there. We're starting to see the patient satisfaction scores come back up. It's a different place. And I just tell this story, first of all, to thank any of you in this room who were part of that. I see a lot of faces I know were definitely involved in that process, and I want to thank you. But I also want to tell the story because it's an issue for all of us to think about. This is what can happen when people engage, when there's a grassroots engagement, and everyone who works at the organization feels a sense of ownership and starts to participate. This is the kind of outcome that you can get. And we need to think about that and how we can make that example relevant to other things we do. Now, I want to talk today for about 25 minutes and then make sure I leave plenty of time for questions about strategic planning, because that is an exercise, of course, that is focused on the future. And the university at some point may very well decide that it wants to do another strategic plan. And that's fine if that's the decision. That's up to the faculty and the staff. But for the time being, U of L has a strategic plan. Actually, depending on how you look at it, there's sort of two of them. So in 2008, a tremendous amount of staff and faculty time was spent thoughtfully crafting what's known as the 2020 plan. And this was published in 2008, and there were 5 pillars or overarching goals that this strategy addressed. And if you look at the list and consider things like education and research and diversity and community engagement and stewardship, gee, I mean, they're just the essence of what we are and what we do. So I'm not sure, you know, if we sat down and rewrote a strategic plan today, if those overarching goals would be much different. I don't know, maybe they would, but I kind of doubt it. Perhaps the subcategories would change, but the overarching goals seem like ones that are completely consistent with the mission of a university. So 4 years later, in 2012, the 21st Century Initiative was written. And again, huge effort on the part of faculty and staff, lots of shared governance as part of the process of writing this. And the idea was not to replace the 2020 plan with this document, but rather to amplify it. This document produced in 2012 was basically a roadmap. It was a little more of a granular approach. How can we actually achieve more of the goals that were written in the 2020 plan? That was the idea. So it was really meant to amplify the 2020 plan rather than to replace it. And so what I want to do is talk a little bit about the 5 pillars contained within these bodies of work and share with you a little bit about what was accomplished, what was not accomplished, and then to me the exciting part, and this is where we're going to need all of your engagement, what could we do? What could some of the things that this university engages in the future look like that would be consistent with what's written in this plan? Okay, so we start with education, obviously, because it's the main part of who we are and why the university is here. And there were a lot of things accomplished, okay? So we've got a lot to be proud of. We have high-quality entering freshmen at the University of Louisville. The ACT scores are better than they were 20 years ago, for sure. Our student-teacher ratios have improved during the period in question. They dropped from 21 to 1 down to about 16 to 1, so there was a good improvement there. Critical thinking became integrated in the curriculum. We had a modest increase in PhD production, although it was not across all areas. It was in pockets. And then, of course, the student life and the campus has evolved a great deal to the benefit of students during this time. Our main extern library was redesigned and repurposed. We have a new academic building that will be open next summer on Belknap. The Swain Center is being expanded and modernized. And then there's been a proliferation of campus housing, both on and adjacent to campus, as well as more and more of these living and learning communities in our campus housing, which we know are linked with student success. Now, that said, you know, this list, which looks shorter, contains things on it that are very worrisome. So we have had a relatively static number of undergraduate degree programs over time, so we haven't added a lot of new disciplines to the mix. Enrollment growth has really not occurred to any significant extent. We've been relatively flat in terms of the size of our student body. And then the one that really bothers me is our graduation rates. So at U of L, the 6-year graduation rate, 6-year, mind you, is above 50% but not much. It's about 53%. The four-year graduation rate is in the mid-20s, which to me is one of our biggest problems. When I go to freshman orientation and we'll sit in a room much like this with about this number of people and welcome them to U of L and watch these high school students throw the beach ball around. It's like a pep rally. It's very exciting. But I look around and I realize that half of them aren't going to graduate. And they're going to leave, some of them with student debt and no diploma. And that's a nightmare. I mean, we cannot allow that. So that, to me, represents a potential for a real burning platform for us to think about where we need to focus. So the slide here is, so what could be? Now, notice I say here could, not should. And please note the difference. This is where involvement by the entire campus community is going to be necessary to help us figure out which of these priorities should we really be focusing on, and how would we go about that, right? This is where shared governance really starts to become an issue. We need input. What could be? So we could decide that we need a dramatically larger student body. Our neighbors to the east at the University of Kentucky have more than 35,000 students, somewhere in the low to mid-30s. The University of Cincinnati is closer to 40,000 students. And we sit around 22,500. Well, we should think about that. Is that the right number, or could we benefit from a larger student body? As well as growing our graduate programs. That might be part of that decision-making as well, not just undergraduates. We talked a few minutes ago about graduation rates. Should we embark on programs to find ways to make sure more of our students actually finish their degrees? Should we revisit the possibility of having a Phi Beta Kappa chapter at the University of Louisville? I'm a proud member of Phi Beta Kappa. It's a great organization, and it's not just what it means to receive it, it's what it means for the whole school to meet the criteria to be recognized as such. It really is quite a goal to aspire to. And then distance education. We have a program, and we offer really high quality distance education, but would it be beneficial for us to grow it? And if so, how should it be structured? There are lots of complaints about the way distance education works today. We've heard those loud and clear, and we really need to make sure we understand, if we're going to do this, that we do it right. Take a place like Arizona State University. You can't turn on the radio without hearing an ad for distance education programs at ASU. There are 100,000 students or something like that. I'm not saying we need to necessarily aspire to something like that, but it's obvious that some schools are really making good on their effort to grow through this technique. So the second pillar, research, but not just funded research, all kinds of creative activity and scholarship and writing. As we look at the two campuses, research takes on many different forms, and we have to take all of them into account. So a lot was accomplished. We had our largest year ever this past year for extramural funding and total research expenditures at U of L, and that was $185 million, which was up from when the 2020 plan was written. You'll see on the next slide, though, what the goal was. So that's why the word modest precedes this bullet point. Likewise, last year was our biggest year ever for clinical trial activity. But again, it's subjective as to whether it was a modest or a dramatic increase. The one goal that we really surpassed from the 2020 plan was the overall number of peer-reviewed publications. We had been shooting for a number in the 1,500 range, and we broke over 2,000. So that area was very successful. We had an increase in our number of patent awards and associated licensing fees, and then there were certainly areas at the university, pockets of success for which were very well known, where that excellence continued. So these are all things that we are to be proud of. Now, not everything was accomplished, though, as you know, and so the goal for research expenditures was about $500 million, and we hit $185 million, so we didn't make it. There were very few new investigators hired. Some, we hired some excellent people, but compared to the size of the organization, not enough. The pipeline's not full. If we go back to when The Bucks for Brains program came out. Governor Patton put that program in place in the late 1990s. It allowed for the hiring of some really successful people who have put U of L on the map from a research point of view, and those folks, some of them, thank goodness, are still here and are productive and are names that we all recognize, and many of us work in their projects. But there isn't a plan to replace these wonderful people as they retire or move on. And that's a concern. And it's very expensive to hire researchers of that caliber. The designation by the National Cancer Institute that was anticipated as one of the sources of revenue for hiring new investigators did not occur. And for reasons that I never understood, that goal was dropped and has not been pursued for the last several years. There was an attempt, I think actually 2 attempts, to obtain a Clinical Science Translation Award. That did not happen either, and that was another piece of the proposed funding model for the hiring of new investigators. And we mentioned earlier that graduate student growth has occurred, but it's been slow and in pockets as opposed to across the board. So again, you see the theme developing here for these pillars, what could be. So what is it that as a research university, our faculty and staff think it would be wise for us to invest our resources and our time and energy in? Should we look at what is really needed to build a scalable infrastructure to correctly support a much larger research enterprise, which would be inclusive of IT and facilities and you know the list, all the things that would be needed as a framework upon which to really build a larger research endeavor. Similarly, a business plan. A business plan was really never developed. In the 2020 plan, they said we're going to hire 60 new clinician investigators. It sounds great, but there was no business plan about how that was going to happen. Bucks for Brains did not recur. CTSA and NCI did not happen, and so there really was no business plan for it. Should we, again, look at a path toward NCI designation? We could. It wouldn't happen overnight. Is it achievable? Yes. If you talk to Dr. Chesney and the folks at the Cancer Center, they'll tell you that if we invested and if this was something we really wished to do, it's within grasp. And then, of course, we are very early here in our approach to developing academic industry partnerships, but there are wonderful academic institutions around the country with mature academic industry partnerships that help support the research enterprise and enrich the educational experience for students. And this is something that we could develop here on a much larger scale. Right now it's in its infancy. So this is the list of potential burning platforms. We'll move on to diversity, opportunity, and social justice, so another of the 5 pillars in the 2020 plan. And so here is a list of accomplishments. Now, this first one is subjective. So you'll notice that in terms of total number of students, number of graduate students enrolled, and number of faculty, we have increased numbers in all of those categories for both African Americans and for Hispanic Latino population. Well, that's great. Now, what's that mean, though? Is this number adequate or not? That's where the subjective part comes in. My bias would be to say that it's not adequate because I'm a pusher. I always want more. I'm not satisfied with the status quo. But the numbers are what they are, and you can see what, in fact, was accomplished. So they moved in the right direction. Similarly, there was also an increase in the number of our current students having opportunities to study abroad. And in the athletics area, we did achieve equity in a number of our women's sports. So there were improvements there. So the list is real, but there's some subjectivity to it. Now, in terms of what was not achieved, real problem here. Number one's not good at all. There is a persistent achievement gap when you look at retention rates and graduation rates for minority students. So again, if we recruit great people and they don't stay or they don't finish their degree, it's for naught, and this is a problem. There are very few African American and Hispanic Latino administrators on either campus. The number of international students being recruited to this campus is extremely small. Now, obviously, there have been some superimposed political limitations on this recently, but we're doing a look back here to 2008. So the fact is that this has been not as robust as it could have been. And then perhaps the most problematic is the last one, and our campus climate still has gaps. There are still places where we do not offer a welcoming enough atmosphere for a diverse population of students, faculty, and staff. There was a campus climate survey done a few years ago at U of L. I've never seen it. I have been told that the results were not good and it was not distributed. So that story should tell you something, and that's a problem. And so what we're doing is we are repeating that exercise. We're doing a thorough campus climate survey, and guess what? We're going to publish it no matter what it shows, because we need to see it. And if there are problems, I don't know how else we would go about fixing them if we didn't know what they were. So what could be, okay, sticking with the theme here, what are some things that we could focus on? So as I've alluded to, we could do a really aggressive cultural assessment, learn from the deficiencies and do something about them. There could be renewed efforts, and there are already pockets of this, certainly, but we could go about it in a more robust way to create scholarships and pipeline programs and the things we know that can help drive success. And we can look critically at how we recruit administrators, deans, people in central administration, key positions where we work with recruiting firms and we have search committees, and how are these entities charged? What are they asked to do? What are the specific goals of the recruitment process? That could be refined. Community engagement is number 4 on the list of 5. So here a lot has been accomplished. So the University of Louisville is really proud of our signature partnership initiatives on the West End. This has been a real opportunity for U of L to use some of the great talent that we have here to help some of those communities that are in the greatest need. So look at these numbers, 21,000 plus instances of student engagement, 4,200 instances of faculty and staff engagement, 250,000 hours of service, more than 200 community partnerships. And then in recognition of this and our many other community engagement efforts, the university is proud now to have twice been recognized by securing Carnegie classification. This is a voluntary program recognizing universities that are engaged with their communities. And right now there are about 360 total organizations in the United States that have this distinction. We've been lucky enough to get it twice. The program started in 2006. We were first classified in 2008, and then it recurred in 2015. So those are our real successes. Unlike the projector. Let's see. Okay. So what didn't happen? Well, there was a wonderful idea launched in 2008 called the City Solutions Center. The idea here is, what we're doing on the West End with the SPI, could we grow that and try to have U of L make an imprint in communities in other parts of the state that likewise need economic development and education and healthcare and all these things. And so in conjunction with the Kentucky League of Cities, an effort was launched to create the City Solutions Center. Fantastic idea. It was not resourced, and it fizzled and closed down in about 2011. So that program did not last. And community engagement, there are areas at U of L where people talk about it and they think about it and they do it because it's just part of who they are and what they do, but it's inconsistent. It doesn't exist in all areas across both campuses. So there's not a consistent pattern of community engagement in our culture. So what could be? So again, we could choose to use this as a burning platform and understand how community engagement could really be an engine for economic development in a lot of areas, West Louisville, but not exclusively there, and make a real value proposition for U of L in the process. Likewise, we could use community engagement to serve as an engine for interdisciplinary education and research. You see, these things take advantage of all the great things we do. Teaching, research, clinical care, all the things we do become part of the way we can help enrich the community in which we live. And then we have a really exciting opportunity over on the West End at 18th and Broadway. There's a property there that Passport, our partners at Passport, have purchased, and we're going to be building a facility there which will employ about 1,000 people. and serve as a real hub for economic development in the West End, but the sky's the limit in terms of what else can reside in this building. So right now we're talking to schools and departments across both campuses to see who might wish to have a presence there and how that would be funded. We're interviewing the neighbors in this area to see what it is they need to make sure that what we place there is consistent with the needs and goals of that neighborhood. So that is something that really could become a progressive focus. And then the last, creative and responsible stewardship. So what was achieved, there was a comprehensive campaign conducted during the years here in question that raised $1 billion. Now that money is subdivided, of course. Some of it is cash, some of it is multi-year pledges, some of them are estate gifts, some of them are programmatic support dollars for our various missions, whether they be healthcare or athletics. It's a whole host of different types of development that occurred, but it added up to a large number and was a real success. We had an increase in financial aid that we were able to offer to our student population in part as a result of this. And we energized and redesigned our Alumni Association, which now is really something to be proud of. We have an active, modern, engaged Alumni Association, which can be a real engine for us to develop many of our missions. Now, of course, everything was not achieved. So it may interest you to know that the endowment goal outlined in the 2020 plan was $3 billion. Okay, that speaks for itself. That was not achieved. A sustainable funding model to support the advancement office itself was not developed. The culture of philanthropy, again, truly evident in some areas, but not pervasive across the whole university community. Donor stewardship, this one really bothers me. What this means is that we had people give money to the university and they weren't treated right. They didn't get reports. Nobody called them back. Nobody let them know what the money they had given was being used for. Not all of them, but enough that it's a problem. And as you might imagine, I hear from these people, and they're agonizing telephone calls. You know, people that gave money 3 years ago and never got a report, and they want to know why. So it takes a long time to rebuild trust when people have had that kind of experience, but it's work that we positively have to do. And then, in terms, what do we raise money for? I think historically there's been kind of a top-down approach where the central administration would say, you know, here are our fundraising goals. That doesn't work as well as, again, the faculty and staff who are doing these exciting things that the donors can then get excited about, right? That grassroots approach is much more effective because, you know, people won't give money unless they're excited about something. And who else to help sell that for the university than the people who are directly involved with the work? So what could be? Well, we had a successful donor campaign before. We could do it again, and we could do it better, and we could build into it the types of approaches to stewardship that would assure its success. Make sure that people giving money to the university are treated like royalty because they are so important to the missions that we hope to accomplish. And then in the process, you know, there's this whole rebuilding of the faith of the community, the reputation, the image of the University of Louisville, which is crucial for us, and something we all know the university deserves, and in time will be restored. Okay, so I'll get to the next slide in a second. I just wanted to pause for 1 second and again reflect that this portion of the presentation was designed to instigate a lot of thinking. I want to try to see if there is a receptivity at this university for people to begin slowly shifting gears and saying, we're going to keep working on the problems that we're busy resolving, but we're going to start planning for the future, because that is what I think we'll all be able to get our hands around and grow the institution to the point where we don't have to relive some of the realities pertaining to budget and other things that we've had to come to terms with here this spring and summer. So that really was the main message I wanted to deliver today. I have a couple of final slides, and then I'm going to take questions. I know there are going to be questions about the budget, so I just tried to be proactive and slip in a slide here on that. I think you all know that the board approved a balanced budget, which in and of itself is a very unusual thing at the University of Louisville. That was done on the 15th of June, and we kept our promise to the students. We did not raise tuition, unlike the other schools in Kentucky, and so we were true to our students there. We based our budget on very conservative assumptions. So for instance, donor income. We put 0 in for new dollars. Well, that's not going to be the case. We know we're going to have a tough year, and we're going to have to get the confidence of the donor community back. But it's not going to be 0. But that's what we put in there, okay? So just to give you some idea that we were very, very cautious about what we placed in this budget. Every month, there is reporting. So believe it or not, we didn't just write the budget, we're going to follow it. And this was never done before. And we're going to see, did we meet it, surpass it, or fall behind? And what kinds of adjustments need to be made to make sure that we're fine going forward? Our budget office does a fantastic job, and they will be very visible. They're meeting with the deans and the LFOs and other key people in your units on a monthly basis. We're watching this like a hawk because we're not going to let it get away from us like it has before. I do want to make it clear that all parts of the university are making sacrifices. So those of you here today who largely work on the health sciences campus are keenly aware of the fact that you're making sacrifices. On the Belknap campus, some people think that the health sciences campus are not making sacrifices. You probably think the same thing about them. And so I'm here to tell you that it's not true. Everybody is making sacrifices. And so this has been a very difficult time. We've all lost positions. We've had people leave our offices and not be replaced who are needed. And I don't want to see that continue. We're going to fix that. But you can't fix that in a month or two. It takes some planning and some work to get beyond those kinds of problems. Some of you may have heard the good news. We are suspending the 6% tax on procurement. I have been going around talking in all sorts of different forums. I have never heard so many complaints about any single thing. If I had a nickel for each complaint I've heard, the $48 million problem would be gone. I should have started collecting them a couple months ago, and we'd be in good shape. But this is an example of a couple things. First of all, the things that we're doing to meet the budget are not cast in stone. I said that when we wrote the budget, that we were going to be flexible, we were going to work with everyone on this to make sure it was successful. And I think a lot of times people see something they don't like and they assume that it's there forever. And this is a perfect example of something where there was a tremendous amount of pushback. People had really good logic to many of the reasons they didn't like the 6% tax. And we listened and we have suspended it. So no one has been taxed for anything that they are purchasing. Now, that said, Mr. Smith, who's here in the front row looking rather nervous about this because he and I are the ones working together to figure out how to save this money on our procurement spend. We spend $360 million a year on procurement across both campuses, which is a huge number, and we have to whittle it down. So we're going to have to save $10 million of that. The good news is that it is working so far, even in the absence of the 6% tax. So thanks to all of you. In July, procurement spend is down about $450,000 from last July, and we have about a 10% drop in number of ProCard purchases July over July. So this is just good stewardship of resources, people thinking about what they're doing and trying to be conservative about their expenditures, and that's very, very much appreciated. That speaks to engagement, right? So there's an example where everyone working collectively fixes a problem. Many hands make light work, and that's what needs to happen here to solve this problem. This is a huge cultural change. Normally, cultural change does not occur quickly. We've had to force it because of very unusual circumstances and dwindling resources, and it's a shame that this process didn't start a couple of years ago because it could have been a lot less painful. But it is what it is. We were given a task to do in January with a very short time frame, and that has caused a lot of pain. So I'm sorry, and I'm appreciative And we're going to do better. This is not going to happen again. We know how to fix this, but it's going to take everyone's engagement to do so. A last slide here. I just want to mention some names. It says new people. Most of them are not new. Most of them are existing people in new roles, with the exception of the first one, Dan Durbin, who I think is somewhere here in the room. There he is our new CFO for the Health Sciences campus. So Dan is a fantastic person with a great background from West Virginia University and is going to bring some much needed guidance to our financial management on the Health Sciences campus. These other three people are not new hires. They're just people who are now serving in roles to replace those who have retired or have resigned. So Ralph Fitzpatrick, a multi-decade veteran of the University of Louisville, now serves in the role that Dan Hall was in prior to his retirement last month. Brian Robinson, who is here, right there in the second row, another veteran of the university, is replacing Keith Inman, who retired Monday, I think. And then John Elliott, who I think most of you know either through ULP or University Medical Center, is the interim VP for Human Resources on the main campus. So he's sort of helping us bridge some HR concepts across the hospital, ULP, and U of L to hopefully standardize some ways that we look at HR issues. So I'm going to stop. I want to make sure there's time for questions, and if some of you have to leave, I can stick around. I want to make sure I get to as many of your issues as I can.
We have have something tremendous to offer to this university. So it is extremely frustrating when across-the-board decisions are made in policy changes that relate to the budget, and we as faculty don't know what's taking place, how those decisions are being made. It does not seem that there is a consideration for the specific needs or situations of individual units. Maybe that is so, but as faculty, we have no evidence of that. And this is really demoralizing faculty, especially in a unit like mine that has been a fantastic steward of funds for 10 years.
So thanks for those comments. Let me try to address, there are 4 or 5 questions actually embedded in what you just said. And Dean Hearn is here, so she'll help keep me honest. We meet on a regular basis. You know, when attrition takes place at a university, when people leave, it's never even. And so unfortunately, it's hard to predict sometimes where resignations and retirements are going to occur. And so in the School of Nursing, you're right. You've had an unusual number of departures of senior faculty members here over the last 6 months. A lot of them were retirements. A fair number of them were retirements. These are not all people who left because they were upset. There were some, but a lot of them were retirements. So that's a problem. And your dean has dutifully brought this to my attention. And the requests that she has brought forward, we've approved the last 2 that she's brought forward. We have not turned down a request yet from nursing. So in terms of people who are available to be hired, the process is not opaque at all. We'll resend the link. The provost, Dr. Billingsley, sent out a very detailed email to all deans and senators and LFOs about the process for obtaining exceptions to the hiring freeze process. Since that process began, we've approved over 90% of the requests that have been brought to that committee. So when we have applicants for positions, particularly in an area like yours where your faculty is down 20%, you know, you're down 10 or 12 people out of a denominator of 50, those are all going to be approved. And I have told that to Dean Hearn. We have not said no a single time. Now, as far as the Budget Advisory Committee, you mentioned that that was opaque as well. I don't know why that would be. That is a committee of the Faculty Senate, and so it is comprised of faculty, staff, and administrators from the central administration and the budget office. It's actually a very large committee. It meets actively, and if I were you, I would touch base with your faculty senators from the School of Nursing to get more information about it, because it is not intended to be opaque at all. Those are very open, active meetings with lots of faculty participation. So I think it's important to understand that, you know, we are not blocking hires in all cases. There are many that are justified, and a lot of the things coming through BAC are being approved. Not everything, but a lot of them. And certainly in an area like nursing where we're down, you know, a significant percentage like that, we're not going to put programs at risk. I mean, some of it depends on how many applicants there are. I mean, I don't know if you have 10 faculty applicants right now to fill those positions. I don't believe you do. But if you did, we'd jump on it and start working on them. And like I said, the 2 that have been brought to us recently, one was just this week, were approved. So let's just talk some more. We need to get you some more information so you don't feel as in the dark about processes like the freeze exceptions and the BAC. Any other questions?
Hello. One of the questions that you asked the group was about our receptivity to take another look and to refine where we are with our strategic plans. And this is really good timing for us in the School of Medicine, because when I came on in 2013 as interim, and we started our strategic planning process that aligned with the 2020 plan and then kind of refined it a bit with 21st century. But what we said at that time is we were going to, midway to 2020, take a fresh look at that and see if that needed to be refined. And our plan, while it doesn't exactly follow those pillars because it includes clinical service, I think it's very consistent, it's very aligned. So I think from the School of Medicine perspective, we're ready to take a fresh look and to go ahead. I've reported on our 15-16 progress, and then over the next month, we'll be reporting on our 16-17 progress. And even in the face of a really challenging year, there's still a lot of good things going on. So, thanks.
It's great to hear. Thanks, Tony.
I'm wondering if you could comment on the future of the foundation, particularly for those of us who are somewhat dependent on its performance, which has been suboptimal. Are you optimistic that that is going to change?
Thank you for the question. So this is nice because I actually have all kinds of people here to keep me honest. In the second row, Keith Sherman, who's the executive director of our foundation, is here. So stop me if I say something that's not right, or feel free to jump up here as well. So my feeling is that the University of Louisville Foundation is already fine. It doesn't have the money in it that I wish it did. Too much of it had been spent. But the things that have been done, it has a new board. The president of the university is no longer running it, so there's a division of power between the university and the foundation. There are very, very good policies in place about how the resources are used. One of them is a memorandum of understanding between the university and the foundation, which defines the relationship between the two organizations and basically defines very appropriate interactions between a university and its foundation to prevent misuse of funds or misappropriation of donor dollars. The foundation has a budget which is sustainable, so they're not spending more money than they can afford to spend, and so the foundation will continue to exist and will not claw into its asset corpus. And they have a company, Cambridge, that manages the assets that does a very good job and brings nice returns for the dollars that are invested. The problem is that a lot of money was spent from the foundation, and the total dollar amount there is simply not adequate to support all the things that we need to support. So it needs to be replenished. And this is why, one of the slides I listed in terms of what could be, we need to talk about the possibility of having a renewed donor campaign to rebuild the assets of the corporation so that it can continue to provide support for those areas that benefit from it. So I think that everything that could be done to help the foundation and solidify it has been done. Now it's a matter of restoring donor confidence and bringing in dollars. And Keith, do you want to add anything to that? Okay. Well, if there are other things that you think of, my email address is the most poorly kept secret at U of L. So don't hesitate to send a note. I respond as quickly as possible to emails, and I truly appreciate your interest and engagement in all that's going on here, and you will hear a lot more from us. This was not intended to be just a one-time conversation. As you can see, I want these to be ongoing dialogues with as many people on both campuses as possible. So thank you and have a great afternoon.